Hi everyone. Welcome to the spotlight session with the lovely Rime. Really looking forward to this chat. My name's Tatum, and because Rime has had some really some challenges even before cancer came along. And I think that sometimes we don't talk about this enough, that life wasn't necessarily all rosy before cancer, and had a diagnosis of bipolar disorder and EUPD, which I will have you explain a little bit more about. And then worked in strategy and partnerships and developments, and then cancer came along, which added so much to what you were already dealing with. And it ended up that you were sectioned, and kind of what I imagine you will be expanding upon is kind of that feeling of rock bottom.
Yeah.
And what you've expressed to me and what we've been chatting about before is really rebuilding, even with the complex PTSD, even with mental health issues, and what has been useful and what has taken you to where you are now, which is like a new direction in life. So I'm so incredibly honored to be here with you.
Thank you.
So we've got and what Rime has already has mentioned is that she loves questions. So if you have questions while she is chatting, she has said that she's quite happy for you to pop them in the chat, and I can relay them. So do know that you can put a question in the chat at any point, and we'll come around to those. So can you tell me a little bit about EUPD, because I hadn't heard about that before.
Yeah, so EUPD basically stands for emotional unstable personality disorder. And it's kind of misleading with saying personality disorder, because people just assume it means you have multiple personalities, and that's a different diagnosis completely. It's called something completely different. This is actually because I am unable to emotionally regulate myself as well as the average Joe, and I require medication to do so. And that helps also with the bipolar, because bipolar, in addition to EUPD, kind of exacerbates my manic and episodes as well as my down episodes. So I have to take medication for that. So this is even before I was diagnosed with breast cancer, and I was learning to manage that, and that's really difficult. And what I learned through coming to Shine is I met other people that also had bipolar and also went through breast cancer, and how their journeys were also complicated as well as mine. And it was difficult for the health professionals as well, because they were dealing with someone that couldn't take the medication, because I couldn't take my mental health medication during my treatments. Because they were going to interfere and it wasn't going to have any impact. So there was a likelihood, they knew there would be a likelihood of me having a psychotic episode or a depressive episode, and I had both. But yeah, EUPD is very much about not being able to regulate your emotions. But yeah,
the things that were keeping you emotionally regulated, things that were keeping your bipolar stable so that you could do your job and everything, those things that you needed, then didn't have access to in treatment.
No, not at all.
So it's one of the most stressful times. Your support basically goes away.
Exactly.
How did you feel when you knew that you weren't going to be able to have your medication?
There's been so many periods where I thought I could do things anyway without medication, because that's the other thing about bipolar, is when you're manic, you think everything is wonderful, and you think you don't need medication anymore because you're thinking irrationally. So that's what happened during my breast cancer. I started going into a manic episode. I was involved in various movements, and I did lots of campaigning, pretending that I wasn't going through all of that. I was going through these delusions. So that's how it triggered. But yeah, it was inevitable in some ways, but when you're in it, you don't realize it's happening. And
did your oncology team have anything in place for you?
They really didn't. They didn't know how to deal with it, and they kept on saying to me, like, after everything, and I calmed down, and after I got sectioned, and I was discharged after all my treatments, etc. Then they realized I needed, therapy, and I mean, during the treatments, actually, I'm completely wrong. I did have some therapy, but it was only 6 sessions, and for someone that has this kind of level, it didn't work. So I can't even, this is the reason why I can't even remember those sessions, because that didn't even touch anything whatsoever. But they did offer that, and that was through Macmillan. But in the end, I had to pay privately several years after my breast cancer journey. And that's why I say to people, if they can get a psychotherapist or a therapist from the beginning to help them process everything, I always will recommend that, because that's a mistake that I made. I did it very late. And I didn't process things, and I was manic, and therefore got involved in lots of campaigns. In some ways, some things come out are positives, and it's not all negatives when you're going through these manic episodes. You can actually achieve also things. That's what the strange thing about it, and that's why people don't know whether you are going through it or whether you are just being generally happy. And
but that must be
difficult.
A challenging place to assess what it is that you need, and also to advocate for yourself.
Definitely.
Relay to a medical team what it is that you need. Definitely. And so how did that kind of, tell me a little bit about your how the diagnosis, the process of being diagnosed was for you.
Yeah, so it was like nearly 5.5 years ago now, but I remember it so clearly. I remember coming out of the shower, and I have a mirror. I don't tend to look at myself very often, which is quite bad of me. And I certainly didn't check my breasts regularly. That's really terrible of me, and especially as I come from a background of public health, where I was part of promoting screening for breast cancer and all these various messages, but wasn't taking on the advice. So I take some part in my errors, but the nipple basically inverted in, and I knew at that point that was definitely going to be cancer. And when I felt it, it was a big lump behind it. So I ignored this for quite a long time. And then when I saw my GP, he referred me, and within 2 weeks, I immediately got biopsies and scans and blood tests, etc. And it was confirmed to me that it was a grade 2 stage 3 breast cancer, because it was 8 centimeters long. So and the thing is, I was saying this to you earlier, Tatum, in films, when they portray people going through cancer, you have this image of your family and friends coming together and supporting you exactly how you want and need, etc. And I had the complete opposite. It actually divided my family, because at the time, not only I was going through breast cancer, but my mother was going through breast cancer. And I never was particularly close with my family. I was always the black sheep, so I didn't feel I wanted them to really be part of my breast cancer journey. So I tried to do it on my own with the help of friends. But obviously, those are all added stresses, and all manifested, unfortunately, in a psychotic episode in the midst of my treatments. It's really difficult. I think health professionals are trying to figure out how to support people that have a mental health diagnosis at the same time as going through intrusive treatments like chemo, which will affect their medication. So that is still a question mark. I don't think they knew what to do. And I think it's something that I certainly want to push for, to try and make understand the health professionals about how it impacts people with a already diagnosis of mental illness. But yeah, there wasn't much for me, really. I had to do all the hard work myself to figure out how to pick myself up and rebuild a new me through psychotherapy.
Yeah. And so where were you in your treatment when you had the psychotic episode?
Yeah, so I was just about to start radiotherapy. So I completed mastectomy, a failed reconstruction. and then lymph node clearing. And then after that, I went into a psychotic episode and I had to keep going. Like, I had a nurse that followed me to the hospital to have my radiotherapy, because it was a daily thing for a period of time. And so, yeah, it was the most awful experience of my life. That was the first time I've ever been sectioned and ended up in a mental health ward. And it was traumatic. Already, breast cancer is traumatic in itself, but adding that on top was just, yeah, it was just on another level that I've never experienced in my life. And then I went into actually a manic episode when I was discharged from there. So I guess when they gave me the antidepressant, that kind of made me go up and up and up. And then I came out, like, again, in a manic episode, and then crashed again into a period of depression. So it was really hard, the aftermath of, even after finishing radiotherapy, like picking myself up in so many bits of pieces was certainly not easy. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. But like I always say,
going through the menopause at that point as well.
Exactly. But I always say to people, I think going through all of this, although I wish it on no one, I think it gives you that kind of depth and understanding about life and about the way you view life, about your perspective. It changes everything in your life. And that's not a bad thing, because initially I was scared of that. I wanted just the old me. I wanted just to get back into normal. And in fact, the doctors, when they first diagnosed me, said, you've got the easy cancer, your life will get back to normal within 2 seconds, don't worry, And I thought maybe that's true, but that wasn't the case for me. And that's not the case for a lot of people that I've spoken to through Shine, and that's what I love about Shine, is the fact that I was able to connect with people exactly that have gone through what I've gone through and understood fully what I've gone through, because they also are bipolar, sorry, and going through breast cancer treatment. So Shine has helped lots in that way. And the breakout program also taught me what's within my control and what isn't. So yeah, it's work in progress. I'm not saying that I've rebuilt myself and, I'm going to save the world now suddenly, but I'm much more realistic now about what I can achieve for myself and within my limits and boundaries. I think it's about learning what our limits and boundaries are as well.
And so were you able to access your medication after the treatment finished?
Yeah, then afterwards they decided a new medication for me that is a mood stabilizer. And that's been working fine. I have my bad days, and I will always have my bad days, because it's a lot. Anyone that goes through cancer, it's a lot to handle. As a human, it's big. It's one of the biggest things you have to kind of understand, process, live with, accept. There's a lot of things you have to do. And there's a lot of anger as well towards it, because it takes away things, it took away my fertility. It took away my right arm. It doesn't function as it used to be, because I developed lymphedema, sadly. So, there are a lot of side effects, and, like chronic fatigue is another one as well, but there's a lot of side effects that come with it, and you have to learn to manage. And it's a new you, it's a complete new you. It's not the old you. And that's really difficult to process and work through. And that's why I say I'm work in progress. There are still times where I struggle, and I admit it, and I'm okay with that. Yeah.
I would be concerned if any of us said we've got it all figured out now, all good.
Yeah. That's what the doctors made me feel like. They were like, yeah, you're going to skip to a happy ever after. And it's not true. There isn't such thing. It's not, it's about finding happy moments. Certainly you can, and you can build on those, definitely. But you have to adapt to a lot of things. You have to accept a lot of things too. And it's not easy.
And I think, I hear from a lot of people that really the processing really starts post-treatment, sometimes a little while after. But for you, that seems to be even more so, because, you were processing so much that happened during that time.
Absolutely.
So, when, like, kind of time-wise, did it kind of hit you, everything that you had been through, and that you might want or need some more support?
I think for me, it was 2 years after my treatments. For ages, I was just kind of existing for the sake of existing. I kind of cut down my hours. I was only working 3 days, and I was just like desperately trying to want to be back to what I used to be, trying to do all the same thing, but I couldn't. I was exhausted. I was drained. I felt depressed, and I'd say it was 2 years after treatments that it just made sense that I need to do something about this, because everything started deteriorating. I was like, I realized I couldn't do the things that I used to be able to do. And that was really difficult to digest. And it was 2 years on that it hit me hard, that I didn't process anything. And I'm just kind of going as a robot without dealing with anything. And I didn't really engage with Shine at that point either. I didn't engage very well with therapy either. But then 2 years on, I did. And I'm 2 years on from doing the therapy still. But yeah, because the thing is, when you've already got mental health problems, that they're usually mental health illnesses usually come from some sort of traumatic experiences in your childhood. And sadly, when I was going through those cancer treatments, everything was brought back up. So it's not just the journey of breast cancer that was overwhelming. It was literally everything was in question in my life. And that was tough, but it hit me hard and made me realize I needed to do something 2 years afterwards. That's when I engaged with Shine. And that's when I started, I went to the first conference that you did about 3 years ago, and I loved it. And I learned so much around dating, around menopause, and how many people have gone through even worse than I've gone through, to be honest. Like, when I say my story, I feel like I shouldn't say this, and I shouldn't encourage others to think this way at all or make any comparisons, but it makes you realize and puts some perspective in your life, if that makes sense. So I'm really grateful for those things, like for Shine especially, and for my psychotherapist who's helped me process a lot of things. I've got to thank her a lot for.
And one of those things that you mentioned there about it bringing up previous trauma, I think is something else that doesn't get talked about that much. But often, if we think of cancer as being kind of often a series of grief, like you mentioned, during, fertility, the grief about multiple different things, that can also trigger older grief and sometimes things that haven't really been grieved yet, or trauma that hasn't really, that comes back up. And sometimes all our coping mechanisms that maybe we dealt with that early trauma, and maybe we were younger and we tied it up in a box and we put it away, and suddenly it's like, boom. And so, were you surprised when that happened, when you were like, why is this coming up right now?
Yeah, absolutely out of the blue for me. I did not expect it, because I've done already therapy for a lot of things in the past, and that's how I've learned to manage myself for many years. But it all came back up. It all came flooding back up when I went through all of my cancer treatments. But they even say, even people without a diagnosis, if you go through chemo, you can get depression. So a lot of people do experience that, and that was explained to me by my oncologist. So if you can imagine that someone that doesn't have any mental health illness can develop depression already, you can imagine someone that already has these mental health problems, it's going to exacerbate it. And that's how it manifested. It manifested in all of my traumas coming back up from childhood all the way up to adulthood. All of it just burst, basically.
And did the doctors say that was part of your complex PTSD? Like, how did that, when did you realize that was what you were dealing with, both, from the past, but also from the cancer? And you had mentioned about a situation where your heart was not doing what?
I nearly died because there was one chemo that my body just rejected and wasn't working. It just didn't work for me at all. It disagreed with me, and so I had to be rushed to A&E, and literally my heart rate was going so low, like it was going to give away. And they kept on like injecting me with saline or whatever. I can't remember at the time what it was to keep me going. I couldn't eat. Nothing was going down. And that was quite scary, because that was like facing death really, you know, in front. And even when someone says the word cancer, that is like facing death straight away. You're like, you know, you have to face it. And that was really hard. And the doctors really, I don't think, all they kept on saying to me, all they tried to do is to keep positive. A lot of them kept on saying to me, this is an unusual circumstance. You know, they made me feel like they haven't dealt with that many people with a mental health diagnosis on top of going through breast cancer. So it felt like I was new to a lot of them, and they didn't know really how to deal with it. And that's probably why I ended up being sectioned, because no one really knew what to do. Even health professionals didn't know what to do, and how to avoid it.
That happened with your heart.
Yeah.
Do you feel like there was a delayed reaction to processing that?
Oh, definitely. Massive delay reaction. Like everything, I just wanted to ignore, like, and pretend that I didn't go through these things. And that doesn't work. It catches up with you. This is what I learned the hard way. And that's why I said, right, that's it. I'm going to invest in doing psychotherapy. And what I, you know, and this is the really sad thing about the NHS, is only they give you 6 sessions. 6 sessions in psychotherapy is useless. It won't even touch the surface of some of the issues that you will go through. So I always recommend, if people have the money, if they can, then, you know, go and get psychotherapy privately and find the right therapist, because it's not straight away that you will connect with someone or that will understand all your problems. You may have specific problems. And
how did you find yours?
So going through several, I went through 3 different ones before I found the right one for me. But yeah, you have to try them out. That's the only way. They give you a little bit of a bio, so you have some ideas. There's always a picture. There's databases for that. Like, you know, I can't remember what the
BACP.
That's it. Yeah. So if you go on their website,
found my therapist.
Yeah. And it's great because you have a little bio, a little explanation of all the things they know how to tackle. And so I found one. Eventually, after 3 different ones, I found the right one for me.
I think it's really good to know that, and you know, and that you were empowered if a situation wasn't, you know, if the therapy wasn't going kind of the way that you felt it could go, to actually leave and try somebody else.
Oh, definitely. I think the great thing is there are so many different types of therapies. There's kind of art therapy, there's laughing therapy, there's music therapies, there's sound therapy, there's movement therapy. There are so many amazing things, and all have positives, because movement is very important for us. Laughter is very important, and it's not being fake. It's about forcing yourself, you know, into an uncomfortable situation. Maybe, you know, just change your perspective on things and rewire our brains into slightly more positive thinking, because going through cancer treatments is traumatic. It's a very traumatic experience for anyone, regardless of someone that has a mental health diagnosis. But yeah, it's just triply hard when you have a couple of other diagnoses on top of everything.
How did you find Shine?
Amazing, absolutely amazing. When I started engaging and seeing what other people are going through, people that can completely empathize with you and understand exactly what you've gone through. And when you say to them, I'm tired, I'm cancelling, like I've made a couple of friends through Shine. Nikki's one of them. I think she's still here. I'm not sure. But yeah, it, you know, it just makes you realize there are people that get it and have gone through exactly the same thing. They know what you've gone through, and that's amazing. And then I did the breakout program, which I highly recommend for anyone, which taught me what is within my control, which is, and what is out of my control, and how to accept, I guess, the new version, and work through that, and accept also your down days and your negative moments too. Allow those negative moments, because they are justified, you know. Everyone that's gone through cancer's gone through hell, really. I don't know how else you could explain it, but it's awful. It's an awful experience, basically. Very traumatic.
been getting some, you got a Go Girl shout out to our breakout group coming in the chat. Yeah.
But
It's
yeah,
an incredible place to meet others. And
yeah,
like, it sounded like also the content of it that you've found, am I right in saying empowering? So
definitely, absolutely. It was so well done. Honestly, like even Nikki will say this to you. She's here. She would agree with me. It was so well done. We were so impressed. And I came out of it with so many tools and resources, way more than I ever had before. And I genuinely mean it. I do actually like to be very critical sometimes. And I want to find like, what are the negatives? I don't know why. That's my kind of personality, which is awful. But I have literally nothing.
at times.
No, it is useful at times, it's true.
Yeah.
But I literally can't say anything negative. It was absolutely so perfectly done, like well laid out. And it really challenged my thinking and made me connect with some amazing women, absolutely incredible women that have gone through different types of cancers. So I highly recommend it for anyone if they have the opportunity, because I think their rolling program is a rolling program. So yeah.
Actually, Claire just popped up in the chat saying applications for the new breakout program are open. It starts in January. So
amazing.
So I had actually a question also came in about you mentioned like the 6 sessions through the NHS.
Yeah.
And those are often like a CBT, kind of cognitive behavioral therapy. And you mentioned psychotherapy. Can you explain a little bit about the differences with that?
Yeah, definitely.
And why you found maybe one more useful?
Yeah, so usually what the NHS like provides, which is right, as you said, is 6 sessions, and it's mostly based on CBT. Although with my therapist, she actually tried, she just got me to buy a book about ACT, which is acceptance and commitment therapy. So I got to do some self-taught therapy as well. But so counseling is really about trying to find ways of how to move forward. It's about accepting where you are and how to move forward. But if you've got a lot of baggage and a lot of other things that have all come back up from all various different traumatic experiences from the past, you can't just start like from that point, because the floor is wobbly. It's a volcano. You're on top of a volcano. It was going to explode. You can't just put a plank on it, avoid it, and think about what you do moving forward. But that CBT is very good for that. But I wasn't at that point in my life. I was getting a lot of traumas coming back up. So what I needed was psychotherapy. Psychotherapy deals in understanding where the root causes of some of your triggers, of some of your behaviors, because you will see certain patterns of bad habits, etc. And it's about understanding where the root cause is from, so that you can avoid them in the future. And that takes a while to even find out what the root causes are. It takes you on one hell of a journey to even get to the root cause of the problem. But that's what psychotherapy does. It kind of breaks you in several pieces and then amends you back into the new you, whilst counseling is about superficial, like moving on. So if you're someone that can bottle things maybe better than others, I don't know, maybe that could be the thing. I personally don't think for me that was going to work. I needed to deal with all of my traumas because they've accumulated to a point where my body couldn't handle anymore. And that's how, and through psychotherapy you do things like EMDR, which type of, so yeah. And
talk a little bit about your experience with that and what
so EMDR kind of makes you, so first of all, you have to do a few exercises. You go through some questions where you try and establish where is your good place, because when you start doing EMDR, it's going to take you into the dark places you don't want to really go to and discuss and talk about. And so what you do first is initially have that visualization of a good place to go to, and then we dig into each trauma, and like you're taken into that trauma, and you try to feel again those feelings that you went through in that trauma, and you try to face it basically, and try in some ways to close it, like have some closure with it, and then find a way of getting rid of it in your own way. Like in my case, a lot of the time what I used to do was tie it in a bow with something heavy attached to it, and I threw it in the ocean, and that's how I got rid of some of my traumas. And there's lots of tapping exercises and sort of, you know, these various movement, and it's to calm you down and ground you. So and then you go back into a visualization of your happy place. So every time, like in that 1 hour session each week, what I would do is go to the dark place, but then taken back straight into, again, the happy place. So I can continue, you know, my life. But that's, so it's a lot, and it takes a long time. And recovery, this is what people...
For trauma,
yeah.
Like...
And people need to understand that recovery is not linear in any shape or form. And again, in the breakout program, you kind of learn that. But I also knew this from public health, because I did a master's in public health and I've worked in public health. I know behavior change is a long process. For some people, it never may happen. And for some people, it's a slow process. And for some people, it's very quick. So it all depends on the individuals. And recovery will have relapses. You know, you need to allow for that, for the relapses to happen. It's natural, it's human, and we need to feel okay about that. Because yeah, sometimes you get told you're strong, you're brave, you're this warrior, you know, and it's like, well no, I'm coping, I'm surviving, you know, so don't force me to be this warrior and this strong, you know, fearless person, when sometimes I don't feel like that, and that's okay. So that's how psychotherapy helped me kind of understand that better, and try and manage those things better, if that makes sense. But counseling is far too superficial. If there is a lot more mental health problems involved, it's not gonna help, and it didn't.
I really liked your example, and so did Claire in the chat, of the wobbly floorboards, right? If you can't find your feet, how are you finding what's above? And that was a really great description. If there was someone else in a similar situation, maybe about to start treatment, and you were in the position of being able to give them, you know, someone that maybe had very similar mental health, you know, medications that they're not about to have access to, what do you wish that the doctors did, or what do you wish that they had access to? Like, do you think there could have been some things in place that could have prevented that psychotic break? Do you feel like it was inevitable, or do you feel like it was a lack of I
think it's a combination of things. I think to some extent it's very difficult to completely avoid it. Like, it could happen, like, and sometimes without necessarily an explanation, a good explanation. But I do think doctors need to be aware of it. I definitely felt like they didn't know what to do with me, and I felt like I needed to advocate, but I couldn't even advocate because I was in a manic episode. So I needed them to really understand me and also check in with me. I think a lot of the time it was all about clinical stuff, about like how they're going to deal with my physical aspect, but no one checked in on me, like how I was doing or how I was feeling or what I was going through. No one knew about that side of things because I was going through a lot of stresses at the time. And I think they could be better at checking in, especially when they know and someone has got these diagnoses, because they were aware of it. They needed to check in a bit better with me, and I certainly didn't get that support whatsoever. I also should have engaged in therapy earlier, and I didn't, and I should have known better. So I could have avoided that. I could have avoided a lot of things if if I found the right psychotherapist that followed me even during my treatments and post my treatments, etc. That would have been such an amazing support for someone that's got mental health illness, definitely. Those are the two things. But I do think health professionals need to get better, because they did not like focus on that part. They didn't care. All they cared about is the physical aspect.
Right. And that's the thing, is that actually, you know, how you're doing mentally is going to affect your physical outcome,
Absolutely.
how you recover and everything. And you would, you know, you'd sort of expect that oncologists and, you know, oncology teams would have seen similar things before, would know, and there's something, you know, so like they would be like, what, you know, even kind of saying, what support do you have in place for when you come off your medication? So that, you know, that's how I imagine, you know, kind of being guided a little bit more, because I know you still kind of, oh, I wish I had done this, like, I know, you know, but in your ideal scenario, do you wish that like maybe there could have been like a little bit more of preparation before you went into treatment?
Definitely. I think a lot of things could have been avoided from much earlier if things were put in place. But that wasn't the case, and sadly, even the support they provided was very limited, and certainly was not appropriate for me. So that's why I had to go privately, even to get the psychotherapy. This is not through the NHS. But yeah, it's really difficult because it's very expensive as well. That's the other thing. And this is another thing we don't talk about in cancer, is the financial side of things, because I had to be out of work for long periods of time. And that meant I went into bankruptcy, because I had to file for bankruptcy because I couldn't cope with paying my bills anymore. People don't talk about that side of things, because when you're out, you know, when you're going through treatments, you can't work. And I was working in the charity sector. Like that kind of protection is very little. They only paid me for, I think it was like a month, and then the rest of the time they're like, really sorry, we can't pay if you. And I was like, okay, that's fine, you know, I'll pay with my own savings. But eventually that, you know, diminishes, and then you're left with. So that is another costly thing. But I made psychotherapy priority because I knew that I needed to deal with things and had, you know, face on. Because it wasn't working, ignoring it and pretending to be, you know, everything back to normal, because it wasn't. None of it was. So I'm really grateful to have been able to do it, to be honest. But yeah, and the breakout program, again, like I said, you know, that's free. Or a donation. I think it's a donation, if I remember correctly. But yeah, it's a great program to help you kind of move forward, definitely.
Yeah, and so yeah, it is free, and some people donate, and it's, you know, so it's accessible.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
do you wish that you had done that sooner, or was that the right time for you when you did it?
No, I should have done it sooner. I think the minute they said to me, I've got cancer, rather than just ignoring it, like get a therapist immediately, find the right therapist, because that takes a little while. Like I said, you know, it's not always the first one that will work for you, but it's definitely a good idea to have someone that you can weekly speak to about these things in a non-judgmental and confidential way. But also join Shine, like, and engage with Shine, because that also has helped me. I wish I did that earlier. I did it afterwards, after all my treatments. I wish I joined much earlier if I knew about it. So yeah, that would be my advice for others. I did make some mistakes in my journey. So I hope others don't make the same mistakes as me, obviously. So this is why I would recommend it much earlier, from right at the beginning.
And tell me about what direction you're going with work now.
Yeah, so I had to take several steps down, because I can't deal with too much stress in my life now. I've got chronic fatigue to manage, as well as lymphedema. So I can't type for very long now. I need a voice recognition program to help me. So I've given up kind of being a partnership and development manager for the last charity, and I was eventually a team leader. So I took several steps down and became a team leader of a crisis cafe that helped people with mental health problems. And again, that was too much. So now I've taken another several steps down, and I'm currently a mental health advisor, so a frontline key worker for people that are struggling with a mental health crisis, and I'm helping them to kind of get over the mental health crisis. So yeah, so it's a way of giving back for me, and also because I'm really passionate about mental health from a personal perspective and a professional perspective. But it's like, I don't have, it's obviously badly paid, these roles, sadly. So I don't do it for the money, but it's so rewarding, and it's my way of giving back, and it really helps me to give myself purpose and meaning to my life as well. So yes, so that's what I'm doing now as a job. Completely changed career.
So we're getting a couple of questions in, asking about your ongoing stress and worry, and like what are your coping strategies, like what are your ongoing ones that you're using now, and I imagine like being in the role that you are now as well, like balancing everything.
Yeah, it's difficult, but I think for me, when I'm helping others, that makes me feel better. So that's like, I think sometimes what you need to do is figure out what works for you. So some things that have worked for me will not necessarily work for others, and that's why therapy teaches you certain tools and resources that you develop for yourselves, that individual and personalized to yourself. So there's lots of like grounding exercises. I used to do lots of, before my lymphedema, I did lots of painting as therapy and coping mechanisms. My weekly psychotherapy, obviously I talk about in-depth things, and that helps me overcome a lot of my barriers, rebuild my self-esteem and confidence. But I also allow myself to have my down days, and allow myself, to feel demoralized, and I go with it. I don't feel bad about it anymore. I just accept that it's okay to not be okay sometimes. So that's what therapy does, is it will teach each of us how to use our own tools and develop our own tools and resources that will work for us. And there's a lot out there. There's a lot.
That's the thing, is we often subconsciously compound. So if we are feeling shame, we tend to feel shame about feeling shame, or like we beat ourselves up for feeling tired, which is then exhausting.
Exactly.
So it's like a lot of things that what it sounds like in there is kind of like when you're having a bad day, when you are feeling, like you use the word demoralized, you're not like, why am I so demoralized? You're just like, I'm having a day. Like, and giving yourself the space to feel it. And do you find that when you do that, that feeling is around for a shorter amount of time?
Definitely, absolutely, because I'm not fighting it. I don't fight it anymore. I accept it. Sometimes it's okay to say things are shit, because they are, and that's okay. But you will find, happy moments. It doesn't mean it's going to be all the time like this. It will definitely pass, but I think let it kind of be there, but don't give it too much attention either, and allow to feel sorry for yourself for that day. And then tomorrow is another day, and start with another way of thinking. But it's okay to not feel okay, and that's what I learned through my therapy, is various tools and resources that work for me, like meditation. That's another thing that's helped me a lot. And it takes ages to even get into it, because initially I was like, oh, what is this crap? Like, it's not, what is this? I really was not into it. I was like, this is voodoo stuff. But eventually I realized it was actually really, really good for me, because I needed time to just switch off and just focus on my breathing. And although it sounds really simple and silly sometimes, even saying it out loud, actually it massively helped me. And exercise, like I try to go for walks, I try to reconnect with nature. I think those are basic things. If I can do that, I feel like I'm having a wonderful day. And I've achieved a lot. So it's about breaking it down to those bite-sized, realistic things that can make you happy, whatever that could look like for you, because we're all different. We're all very, very different.
Definitely. And so when you do have a chronic fatigue day that just wipes you, what is your kind of process when you feel it coming? Like, how do you greet it when you know it's on its way?
Yeah, well, I don't greet it very well, I'll tell you that. I get so annoyed that I have it because I can't do half the stuff that I used to be able to in the past. At the moment, I've just signed up to a fatigue clinic. So that exists. I never even knew that existed. They will be supporting me. There's a massive waiting list, so I'm still waiting for them to help me. So at the moment, I'm not managing it brilliantly, but I'm just going with it. If I am not well, I'm not well, and I go with it. And if I need time off, I need time off, and I just go with it. But the meditation actually helps a little bit as well, like even just sound meditation, you know, just like the sound of the ocean or the sound of the rain or whatever. So I put that on my radio, and that helps me as well, like, you know, calm me down, you know, feel at peace with being fatigued to that point. So, but yeah, I don't know any techniques at the moment, but I do know there is a fatigue clinic. I found out and I'm on the waiting list.
It's so they're out there, and you can probably see my chimes up behind me. So I enjoy a bit of sound and really like, yeah, I've got like a sound bowl down here.
I've got one as well, actually.
Yeah, and it is kind of nice, like it just in the, like if it's a stressful day, I just go by and knock a chime. Or if I'm stomping by, they just lightly tinkle because I've gone by so fast in a bad mood. So that's yeah, so it's nice to, what it really sounds like you've done is kind of build a almost like a kit of different things that you're drawing on. So whether that be meditation, psychotherapy, reaching out to someone at Shine, you know, seeing people that have kind of similar things than you, hearing from people that have quite different things, and you know, kind of acceptance some days and accepting the annoyance on another day.
Exactly. We're human. And we're imperfect. I mean, even life before cancer, for me, there were ups and downs. So, you know, it's a cancer just added. But at the end of the day, you have to live with it. And I think you have to find you have to have a happy medium with yourself. And that's what all of these things have taught me. I think going through cancer like makes you more insightful about yourself. Like I wouldn't wish it on anyone, but it does make you deeper as a person. Like even when I'm interacting with friends that have just had luck all their lives and not really gone through challenges, there is a lack of depth in comparison to when I'm speaking to someone that's just gone through cancer. You know, I can't explain it. Like when I'm talking to people that have gone through it, there's a level of depth that you don't experience with people that have just been very fortunate and not had any major traumatic experiences in their lives. So, you know, I don't wish it on anyone, but it does change you as a person for sure.
And it sounds like you're using that in your new role as well.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, absolutely.
So, oh, thank you so much for sharing.
No worries.
And I'm just going to put that out to anyone. If anyone has any last questions for Rime, pop them in the chat. And I'm just going to have a look and see if I missed any. But just to say, people have said that your insight is incredibly helpful. And thank you so much for being so open. And so lots of lovely
positive messages.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, but really a lovely yeah, what do you wish people had said to you at the beginning?
I think so, because I think people want to tend to go towards making things rosy, and I don't think that always works with everyone. Maybe some people like rosiness, I don't know, but for me, I like facts, you know, and I don't like someone telling me everything's going to be rosy afterwards, when actually, as a matter of fact, there is a possibility it can't be rosy. So I just, you know, like it's about being honest, and I think, and open about these things. And I'm going to compare it to even, people that go through pregnancies, for example. People lie to you. They say, oh, yeah, it's wonderful, everything is great. And then when suddenly you're going through that birth, it's a horrific. A friend of mine kind of explained it. She was like, we lie to each other about certain things, like just to cover up, but why? I think it's better to be open and honest, and also think, okay, things could go right. They could, but things also could go wrong. And that's okay. Like, it's not the end of the world. Like, we just have to work with what we're given, really. It's not always easy.
So I've got a couple more comments. Thank you for all your thoughts and reflections, and this has been so fantastic. Yeah, so one last question. You mentioned that you sought support from people other than your family, and this is, something that other people experience too. Where did you find that support? Was it difficult to explain to those around you why you needed to go elsewhere?
Yeah, it was. It caused a lot of problems with my family and I, because they wanted to be part of my breast cancer journey, and I didn't want them, because at the time I wasn't getting on with them. I felt it was false to kind of get them involved and seeing me in a vulnerable place and looking after me. So a lot of my friends kind of stepped in initially, and I did it on my own. Most of it I did it on my own without any help, and that was really, really difficult. It caused our family to kind of really kind of separate in lots of ways, because at the time my mother was going through breast cancer as well, so she's the only one I get on with. She couldn't look after me, she had to look after herself. It was a really it divided everything, and I didn't have the right support. But some people out of the blue wanted to step in and help me during that period. But yeah, I lost a lot of friends after all of that as well. Like, and going through Shine helped me realize that other people have gone through exactly the same thing. So I think peer support is really powerful. And again, yeah, like, I can't say enough, but it's therapy that really, for me, like, saved me. But yeah, connecting with people that have gone through the same thing is easier, because you can talk to them and they come from a very understanding place, whilst your family can sometimes be the most disappointing, and sometimes amazing. For some people, their parents have ended up being the best thing. Their family turned up and they did everything that person wanted in their way. But there's also some of us that didn't have that. We didn't have our parents and family that understood us or wanted to support us in the way we wanted. So it's about accepting that, like, there's nothing, those are out of your control things. And again, I learned that from the breakout program. Those are things that are out of my control, and I can only work with what is in my control.
I think it's really powerful to know you're not alone in that. And I think
definitely,
you put it so perfectly at the beginning, what you've seen in films and like, we do sometimes have this idyllic, and sometimes the people that we think are going to step up and be closest, and sometimes it doesn't, and that can be an additional grief and additional challenge. And you were saying, like, your mum was the person closest to you, and then she was in her own situation,
exactly,
breast cancer as well.
Yeah, it was tough. It's really, really tough. But then, yeah, again, connecting with Shine, that's what's been amazing, is the fact that, one, that everyone's under 50, because I remember going to my first support group. That is one thing they did suggest, and not only the 6 sessions of therapy, but I did have a support group, but everyone seemed to be 60 and over. So I was like, oh, okay. And then I engaged with it once, and then that was it, because I couldn't connect with these ladies. Their issues were completely different to my issues. They were talking about their grandchildren and their children, and I was talking about infertility. We were on complete different levels. So Shine has been completely amazing connecting with right people. So I've made a couple of friends, one in particular who has bipolar 2 and had to go through breast cancer, so completely the same thing as me, and really understood, and doesn't get on with her family either, and so you will connect with people that completely get you, and that's what's really magical about Shine, truly.
you so much. This has been just a really, really wonderful hour.
Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, of course. And, you know, just to echo again, the responses that we've gotten is just like, thank you for being so open and so insightful. And, you know, so many of us can take, you know, really great bits of information and understanding from what you've shared, and I can see hearts appearing. So thank you so much, Rime.
Thank you, Tatum. Thank you so much.
Have a lovely rest of the conference.
And you too. Okay, take care.
Thank you, everybody.